Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. But fortunately for you, I'm not going to be doing most of the talking. I have a guest with me. I have Bob Worldbuilder with me, and he's going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, but specifically Dragon of Icespire Peak and the lack of Dungeon Master guidance around this adventure. Hi, Bob.
Hey Fred, how's it going?
It's going all right. I'm really hoping that you have lots of really choice bits of advice for people around actually running this adventure, because it does look like a beginner dungeon master adventure when you first open it up, does it not?
Yeah, they obviously do market it as such, as the essentials kit, what everybody might kind of need to get started. But as, the reason we're here today is because it does fall short in certainly a few areas.
So I understand that you have quite a number of videos around helping people run through this adventure on your own YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I've only been doing this for like a year and a half or so at this point, but very early on, I made some videos about the starter quests for Icespire Peak and how to walk through them, just how I did it because I was really excited about this module, and recorded some gameplay too with my fiance, and then it turned into this whole series that took pretty much a year to do, kind of interspersed every couple of weeks. And now I have videos for every quest in Icespire Peak, DM guides with some tips about how to run them. So we're going to be touching on a bunch of those, I guess.
So I guess thought I would sort of ask you, what do you think are some of the key issues or problems that dungeon masters might voice with regard to trying to run this adventure?
Well, one of the things that definitely stands out is just the lack of advice in the book itself. Like something that we had kind of mentioned before was that Lost Minds of Fandelver has like DM notes for the whole first encounter of kind of like what you should be asking your players and when to roll and what they should roll. And what I noticed in Dragon of Icespire Peak is that it kind of does that separate from the adventure itself. Like it has some of that info in the rule book, it has it in the beginning of the adventure book, but not during the adventures. Every adventure is just its own like 1 to 3 or 4 pages with kind of notes to walk you through and doesn't tell you how to prepare. The first piece of advice for any newer DMs out there especially is to read the adventures ahead of time. It doesn't say to do that anywhere in the book. It just kind of says to flip to it and read the descriptions as your players, pick up the quest job card and decide to go there. So that's my like first and foremost piece of advice is to read these beforehand, maybe watch some videos about them, and have an idea of what you want your players to experience at each of these locations.
So one of the things I noticed with the adventure, and I'm almost completed, I've got the last quest, Icespire Hold. The dragon is coming up. I'm not looking
Okay.
forward to it because yeah, there are some issues, but we'll get to them. So one of the things I did notice is, as this is supposedly a beginner adventure, there are some very, very deadly encounters that I can think of that they're not just sit in the deadly range, they sit beyond the deadly range into the kill everybody in the party range.
Yeah. How about that
Did
first
you?
quest? So not necessarily the first one, because of course the players can choose any of the first 3 starter quests from the board. But I'm pretty sure we've both made videos that really talk about like the Manticore starting out. It's like a CR2 creature. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head. And for newer DMs, that means that D&D assumes a second level party would have a fair fight against it. And first level characters have like it's a big jump between first and second level. Those first level characters, if they try to fight it, could easily fail unless they have some great strategy in mind, which some new players still might. But there's really like some sparse notes I'm pretty sure in there about trying to communicate with this Manticore. But it ends up that in Dragon of Icespire Peak, that seems to be like an optimal way to go most of the time, is like trying to reason through these problems with the monsters, which is okay, and that's a totally fine way to play. But a lot of people do come to D&D wanting to fight monsters, and when the book like stacks it against you like that, it's not the most fun situation necessarily for everybody.
I think one of the actually there's two encounters that stand out for me, and that is the wererats.
I think that was actually where like some of my videos like took off because it was this major point that is left out of the book that like, hey, well, it's not completely left out, but that you need silver or magical weapons to do any damage or magic spells, I guess, damaging spells to do any damage to the wererats. And as a new DM, that's something you might not even notice, I guess, when reading the stat block, and in which case it wouldn't be a problem. But as someone who has made that mistake before and this time was like really certain, like, yep, I remember they're immune to everything except silver and magical damage, it ended up being not great for my players. They had to run away because the module doesn't have any opportunities built in to get these silver weapons, and there's only one or I think two, maybe three spots where they can come across a magical weapon, and they're probably going to happen later in the adventure. So yeah, the wererats are one where, oh, and the funny thing, the point I brought before of trying to communicate with them doesn't work either, because the book even says that they will lie to you and say like, oh yeah, go clear out our old hideout and then we'll go back there. But then right after that in the book it says like, but this is a ruse and they have no intentions to really leave the mines. So
Yeah, yeah. And then I think Exholm and the spiders and the advice around how many spiders per party member, and it's not good. It's not good if you do that.
Yeah,
That
in my
winds up being
video, go ahead.
it winds up being the main event because it's so deadly. It's even more deadly than if you follow the scaling for the ghouls that come rushing into the main foyer area. So it's crazy stuff, and it keeps going on like that. And it's only when they start developing a few levels behind them that they can kind of deal with some of these nasty surprises.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm wondering if maybe they just really wanted all parties to include some sidekicks, and that like levels it out or something.
But even with sidekicks, unless you, because I looked at how it's got, and that challenge ratings garbage, I do realize, but it is some sort of guide for people. But then once you play through them and you have thought about, okay, what's going to happen, it's still, I had experienced players running through this, 4 to 5 experienced players, not a solo game. And they really, really struggled in some cases. And they had like a Gloomstalker, had like 3 attacks every single round. It was great, crazy stuff. So they knew what they were doing. So yes, I believe in running adventures where there is a mixture of easy to deadly. But the only thing is, I feel like with beginners, I don't usually throw deadly stuff at them. I usually wait until they have matured. But I have no mercy on experienced players. Beginners, they shouldn't have to deal with that straight away.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said a minute ago about CR being not the most reliable gauge, like when I'm running encounters for like a homebrew game, or even a lot of times when I'm running pre-made stuff, I don't think about balance too much, because to me, it's like that's one of those things where if every encounter is kind of evenly matched for the party, it loses a little bit of the danger, I guess, when they expect to be able to win every time. So I don't always worry about it, but I agree that for new players, and especially a new DM who's going into this like thinking like, yeah, we're gonna go through all these adventures and have a great time, like all our heroes leveling up, and then they get killed by that manticore on the first go. It's going to be not the most fun start to D&D for a lot of people.
Now, to be fair, Lostmon of Fandelver made exactly the same mistake, because the goblin encounter for roughly 4 to 5 level 1 characters will pretty much, they're going to take out the party. And that's happened many times. We've seen it on Reddit and the internet many times. The other thing is I will sort of feel like the Dungeon Master would literally have to go through for their group and check the scaling, that it is sitting roughly between easy to deadly, and that it's not going too far off the scale of deadly to the other end, where they may, in fact, find themselves so heavily outmatched that they go down before they can run away.
So in my case, I was running it with one other person, so most of those scaling things don't really work out, because like the main thing about D&D is just kind of the number of allies you have, like number of people on your side in the fight, and just how many attacks you can kind of do based on that. And so with one character, even though she had two sidekicks, I really had to tone things down to keep it survivable. And most of our encounters ended up, like, I think I went a little far in most of them. Like, most of the time, I think my adventures were pretty unscathed. But that was just kind of the nature of our game. So it does surprise me that even for your group of, like, 4 or 5 experienced players, that the scaling stuff didn't really work for you guys either, you're saying?
No, not at all. Some situations did not work at all.
What would you say was the worst one, or if it wasn't the spiders?
No, it was definitely the spiders.
Okay.
My players, when they got to the werats, they just looked at me and did a knowledge check on werats, and they got the right number that they needed to know, and they just looked at me and said, "We're leaving, Fred." And I said, "Okay, all right." And they said, "Do we have to roll initiative?" And I said, "No, if you're just going to run away, then I'm not going to go through them chasing you down. You just run away," because I knew they could not get away if they tried to do it that way. I just got to let them go. The job board stands out for me as probably one of the least favorite aspects. I like the idea of giving players variety, but did you notice that there feels like there's too many adventures or too many locations in the adventure, and that unless the adventure states you don't have to use all of them, there's a tendency for a dungeon master to try to use all of them. Also, to maybe drop too many quests and have to do too much prep to be able to survive the session.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's always at least, I guess, 3 jobs on the board at a time, which, as a DM, like, it is always great to give your players that choice and that agency in deciding. And again, the way this book kind of sets it up is like, it's written as if you're going to have your players pick that card and be like, okay, here's where we're going. And then you're just supposed to read through it like as you go. But obviously that's not really how anybody runs the game. So for new players, that's a little misleading. You should definitely be preparing ahead of time. And if you have to prepare 3 full locations, that can be a lot. Like usually, I guess a good tip for this module is something I encourage people to do anyway, is at the end of a session, really gauge, like, that's when they should pick the next job. So then you know what they're going to do next time, and maybe they'll change their mind, but at least you'll have that one really prepared for when they decide to go there eventually. And there's a lot of locations. They don't all need to be explored. They don't all even provide any incentive, actually, because some of them don't have rewards, these ones that aren't on the job board, and then, like, for the characters, and they don't have rewards for the players then, because those ones not on the job board end up not playing into the level advancement stuff that's recommended in the book either.
I only gave them 2 to begin with. Two quests. I thought that was enough choice, one or the other. And then after that, we sort of did exactly what you suggested, which is sort of feel where they're going, and then I would sort of maybe add in another one once they completed one, so they could make a choice between 2 rather than a choice between 3. There's too many choices.
And I think something else about the job board that can kind of be a problem is that it does take away from some engagement with the NPCs, because the other way that players can find out about some of these locations is through that rumors table that's in there, but it only shows, I think it only reveals maybe the starter quests and like 1 or 2 of the side locations. But in talking to NPCs and interacting like with the world is a big part of what D&D is about too, and kind of minimizing that to a job board where they're just going to pull off a post and go for it takes away another part of the game, I think. So
I guess the other thing, and you sort of highlighted that a little bit, and that's the level advancement, because there is at least 4 quests, right? Well, 3 locations and 1 quest that don't actually contribute to the milestone system that they have set out in the adventure.
But yeah, these locations definitely have some formidable combats or whatever, scenarios in some of them, especially like Circle of Thunder, where you're basically fighting another boss of this game, this giant boar that's the same, or supposed to be the same, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess difficulty as Cryovane, the dragon. It turned out in my game anyway that boar ended up being a lot tougher than Cryovane. I don't know if how your players fared against Gorthok, the Thunder Boar.
The NPC they befriended died horribly.
Oh, no. Wow.
Yeah, that centaur did not survive. And so Xanth was his
Yeah,
name, I
Xanth,
think.
that's it.
Yeah. They loved Xanth, so they had to bring Xanth back to life. But that required an awful lot of bribery to get the dungeon master to pull that off, unfortunately for them. And then I guess the thing that I am concerned, because you've been playing for a while, you're like level 6, and then you get to the dragon, and the dragon's really easy for a group of level 6 characters and you have like 4 or 5 of them. If we're going with the standard makeup of 4 or 5 players, it's easy for them to deal with, really.
Yeah. And it's for really like the one reason that, or at least in my experience, I think it would have been a little bit more fair of a fight. Maybe not as fair as the book wants it to be, but it would have been better if the dragon isn't asleep when they show up. Because obviously that's going to give them the opportunity to get the jump on it. And it even says in there that like the winds around Icespire Hold kind of deafen any other sound. So even if they end up fighting with the bandits that are there, or there's like some sturges in a chimney, like in my prep, I think I did make my own note of like, if they make noise in the rooms with chimneys, like the dragon will hear it because they're all like right on the roof then, and it would like echo up there. So maybe use that tip. But in general, I suggest just having it be awake. Maybe it doesn't like know they're coming, but at least it'll be somewhat ready when they show up. Because little spoiler alert for my series, if you're somebody watching through the gameplays, but it's pretty obvious from the beginning of the episode. My characters end up defeating it in one round, like while it is asleep, in the surprise round. And I gave it like 1 HP extra then. Like they did way more damage than they needed to. I gave it like a single hit point of just like so hopefully it'd be able to act. But then when we finally rolled initiative, it turned out that the dragon was going to go after one of the other characters anyway. So they were just able to finish it off. No problem whatsoever.
And then after you've defeated the dragon, treasure hoard. We're all looking for treasure.
Yeah, right. It's Dungeons and Dragons. There's certainly some dungeons in here. There's one dragon, and then the dragon doesn't even have the reward that a lot of players would expect, especially experienced ones who've fought some dragons in the past and know the lore of them in D&D, and really I guess the general lore for dragons is that they hoard that treasure, but this dragon doesn't have any in the book. So I'll say one tip that I heard I really liked from someone who did comment on one of my videos was that they had the hoard be frozen, like somewhere in it might have been on the roof, but basically that it was like covered in ice. So then for the players to get the loot after they defeated the dragon, they still really had to like fight for it and work for it to chip out every gold piece, I guess. So I really like that. And what I did in my game was I had some treasure hidden in the like Undercroft area, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, of the Icespire Hold. So it was in like one of the coffins, which I wasn't sure if my players would find, because in the Dragon's Barrow, where they explore some coffins, my players got a face full of that poisonous gas right away, and then they didn't want to explore any other ones. So, but they were a little bold this time and found the treasure at the end. So everybody went home happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely you've got to put a treasure hoard in there, otherwise they're not going to be very happy with you at all. There really isn't enough information on the non-player characters in this adventure, particularly if you're a beginner dungeon master, intermediate and experienced. But we're not going to go into that too much. You're nodding, so you agree. But if you want to check that sort of stuff out, I did 2 videos on the topic, but you got to go and see Bob World Builder to actually see more information on the NPCs if you really need help with that.
Yeah, that's right. The part 2, I guess, of this video will be us chatting about how to roleplay these NPCs and roleplay NPCs in general, I guess. Just some little tricks for how to do it as a beginner, and maybe some tricks that are helpful for you experienced players as well.
Not an awful lot of advice around if you're not going to go engage in combat, which is the smart move, right? Not to engage in combat, but there are alternatives on how to do that. That's very, very sparse, correct? Now, your videos actually do show Grace and your group doing that, doing a lot of things that don't involve combat.
Yeah.
But for a new dungeon master, there's really not much. It's like maybe a sentence, if that.
Yeah. There's really, like I said, it shows up in the wererat video a little bit. It shows up the wererat like quest a little bit. It shows up a little bit around the manticore, but other than that, there might only be like one or two other spots where it really suggests or gives any kind of explanation for what these monsters or villains might do if the players decide to talk to them. Because I think like their motivations are kind of like a crucial piece that's left out in a lot of places.
So where can they find you, Bob?
Yeah, so it might be on the screen here, but you can find me as Bob World Builder here on YouTube, also on Twitter, and I have a Patreon and Facebook and all those other things too. But Bob World Builder on YouTube. If you search Dragon of Icespire Peak, you'll probably come across one of my videos.
So hey, thank you, Bob. It's been fantastic. It was great to have you on the channel. So if you want to know more about Bob's stuff, you go and watch his videos, because he's got a bunch of videos on the topic, and you'll get lots out of them. If you want to support either one of us, make sure to share, like, and subscribe. We both have Patreons. We both have affiliate links to Amazon and other locations like that. I've got a merchandise shelf. I don't know if you do, Bob, but if you don't, I'm sure you will eventually. Can't be that far
Yeah,
off.
not quite yet.
And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.
Yeah, and keep building.